Kiddush and Motzi in the other room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somewhat on time. Hi friends, Shabbat Shalom. I hear our custom is to start on time. So let's start on time. We begin on page 5 with Shalom Aleichem, and I strongly invite you to sing along with me. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Uni L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At my house, that's the sign around the Shabbat table for the dog to come up and start begging for a treat. We turn to page 11 for L'chuna Ranana. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. L'chuna Ranana l'Adonai. Nariya letzor yishenu, nekadma fanav betoda, bizmirot nariya lo. Bottom of the next page. Arbaim shana akut bedor, v'omar am to'e levavhem, v'hem lo yidu derachai, asher nishbati bi'api, im yavun el menuchati. Next page. Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai, baruchu shemo, basru miyom liyom yeshuato, sabru v'goyim kevodo, b'chol ha'amim niflotav, ki gadol Adonai, hulal me'od, norahu, al kol Elohim, nai, ki kol Elohei ha'amim elelim, v'Adonai shamayim asa, hod v'hadar lefanav, hoz v'tiferet b'mikdashto, havu l'Adonai mishpechot amim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kevod shema, se'u mincha, uva'u lechatzrotav, ishtachavu l'Adonai b'hadrat kodesh, chilu mipanav kol haaretz, imru v'goyim Adonai malach, aktikon tevel bal timot, yadinamim b'meisharim, yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz, Yiram hayam umela yalo sadai v'chol asher bom, az yiranenu kol atzeyar lifnei Adonai kiva lishpat haaretz, yishpat tevel betzedek, ve'amim be'emunato, yanai, nai, 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 yanai, nai, 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 yanai, nai, nai, yanai, nai, nai, yanai, nai, nai, nai. turn to page 21 and we rise. Mizmor LeDavid, Havu Ladonai B'nei Elim, Havu Ladonai, Kavod V'Hozanai, Havu Ladonai, Kevod Shemo Ishtachavu Ladonai B'Hadrat Kodesh. Kol Adonai al hamayim el hakavod hirim Adonai al mayim rabim Kol Adonai ba'koach hananai Kol Adonai Hadar Kol Adonai Shover Arazim Vashaber Adonai Et Arzei Halvanan Vayarkidem Kimo Egel Levanon Vesiron Kemo Ben Re'emim Kol Adonai Hotev LaHavodesh Kol Adonai Yachil Midbar Yachil Adonai Midbar Kadesh Kol Adonai Chalel Ayalot Vayechesov Kulo Omer Kavod Adonai Lama Bo Yashav Vayeshev Adonai Melech Leolam Adonai Oz Le'amo Yitein Adonai Yivarech Et Amo V'Shalom. You may be seated, and for anyone else who lost their place, I hope you feel better knowing that I did too. We turn to page 23. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish taught, the day of Shabbat came before the Holy One and said, Creator of the world, every day has a partner. Sunday is Monday, Tuesday is Wednesday, but I have no partner. And the Holy One replied, Israel shall be your partner. And when Israel stood at Sinai, God said to them, Remember my promise to Shabbat, that Israel will be your partner. Thus it is written, remember the day of Shabbat to keep it holy. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Hamor v'zachor b'dibor echad. Hishmianu el hamyuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shemo tiferet ve'letila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nilcha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Mikdash melech ir melucha, kumitzei mitov ahavecha,
רב לך שבט בעמק הבכה, והוא יחמול עלייך חמלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי מעפר קומי, לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי. על יד בן ישי בית הלחמי, קורבה על נפשי גלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לא תבושי ולא תקלמי, מה תשכחי ומה תמי, בך יחסו אני עמי ונבנתה עיר אל תילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. והיו למשיסה שועצייך ורחקו כל מבלייך, יסיס עלייך אלוהייך כמשוש חתן על כלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תריצי, על יד איש בן פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. We rise and face the entrance. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמונה עם סגולה. בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. You may be seated. We turn to page 28. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyards. We're going to sing Tzadik Tamar in both the Hebrew and the transliteration and the English, right where the little red triangle points. Tzadik Tamar yifrach ke'erez ba'alvanan yizkeh shetulim bebeit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu Ya'ad Deshenim verananim yiyu lehagid ki yashar Adonai turi velo avlatabo. We turn to page 30 for Mourner's Kaddish. I invite you to rise if it is your custom or if you're observing a yard site. Yitzgadal v'yitzkadash shemei rabbah v'alma divrach hirutei v'amlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach leolam olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'mamav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. You may be seated. Shabbat shalom, everybody. It's a pleasure to get to be here with you. From creation to the American Revolution and all the way to the startups of today, every good story begins with a founding myth. Couples, families, teams, each one has an origin story that gets told and retold until it takes on a life of its own. Some are tales about big moments worthy of emphasis and the embellishment that they receive. Others, though, are fairly inconsequential, but somehow made enough of an impact that they're repeated until they can be recited even by those who weren't born yet when they happened. So on that note, I want to share one of the foundational stories of my marriage. It is about a fight that my husband Josh and I had when we were newly dating. I should start by stating the obvious. I was right. Actually, I'm teasing. I wasn't right, and I wasn't all right. I was an anxious ball of nerves, telling myself a story that was both entirely false and mostly unnecessary. The details aren't particularly important, but the story ends with me standing in a hotel room in D.C., heart racing, pleading with Josh not to break up with me over the phone. It was not one of my finer moments. But he did ultimately agree that breaking up could wait until I got home. Okay, so why am I telling you a story about our near breakup? Because it's not about the breakup. It's about that panicked, crazed feeling of not being able to control the outcome of something you are deeply invested in. We all have these stories, some of which we're more willing to share out loud than others. We've lost jobs, we've received scary diagnoses, we've been dumped and duped, and we've watched things we want slip through our grasp. Often our reaction to these moments don't exactly show off our prettiest, kindest version of ourselves, to put it mildly. For me, the situations that I truly can't control, that are heartbreaking but already final or decided, are a different sort than the ones where I sense an ending but can't be quite sure. A miscarriage or a top choice college rejection come to mind as totally, absolutely beyond control. Sad and definitely future-altering, and maybe even dream-shattering, but plainly not controllable. There's just nothing you can do to change that outcome. It is the ones that come with a sense of insecurity and uncertainty, with clear writing on the wall, but no final proof, that lend themselves to that feeling of crazed panic. It is as if what I desire is being held just out of reach. Perhaps if I try just a little harder, beg or plead, in a new way I can get what I want. Those are the times that self-doubt comes storming in, and that feeling of hyper-desperation bubbles up and makes us act in ways that we would consider totally out of our character.
As Brene Brown tells it in Dare to Lead, in the absence of data, we always make up stories. This is why, when I read the story of the golden calf, this week's Parsha, I read it with a sense of compassion for the Israelites. They had just begun to fall in love with their leader and their new deity. They were still in the trust-building stages of their relationship, but the future looked promising. After 400 years of abusive power plays and hardships and a tremendous lack of control, they were wondering if this could be it. Hopes and expectations were running high when they last saw Moses ascend the mountain to talk face-to-face with God. And then he didn't come back. Tradition tells us that the Israelites expected Moses to return 40 days after he went up the mountain. But they counted those days differently than Moses did. So they panicked when he didn't return on time. Kind of like frantically texting your spouse at 11:31 when they said they'd be home at 11:30. Not that any of us could relate to that. I imagine that desperate doubt creeping into their minds and spreading like wildfire through the camp. Maybe he was attacked by wild bears. What if Moses had died on day 2 and we've been fools for waiting for him for these past 38 days? What if this whole thing was a scam and he's never coming down the mountain? What if God ate Moses? As the ideas got more and more far-fetched and unrealistic, any version of a logical truth moves further and further out of reach. And we become obsessed with the ridiculous story that we're telling ourselves because we've become unable to see beyond our own emotions. Irrationality crowds out logic, and oftentimes our desperation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In this scenario, it seems obvious that the Israelites would build the golden calf. Being their substitute leader, but feeling his doubt crowd out logic himself, Aaron miraculously slowed down their production of a replacement God, but he couldn't stop it altogether, and perhaps nor did he want to. The Israelites' goal was to rapidly put back together the dream of being a people with a God that they could depend on before that dream was permanently shattered with real proof. And they would have fulfilled that goal had Moses actually been eaten by God or for any other reason not come down that mountain. Brene Brown calls this first reaction an SFD, something that for this family-friendly crowd I will translate as a stormy first draft. But you can look up the real S word on your own. This is a story that we tell ourselves that exposes our fears and anxiety, but wouldn't actually make any logical sense to an outsider with a clear perspective. It's our job as the writers or the people living in the tough moment to recognize that this isn't reality. This is just the story that we're telling ourselves. And then it is our job to work hard to figure out what that more accurate story is. And it's a challenge that most of us deal with on a not infrequent basis. But there's one more piece of this story that's worth exploring, the flip side of the story, and that is God's and Moses' reactions. You might know the story and you might think that they were wrong, that their responses were overly emotional and dangerous. And proof of this is that Midrash tells us that God offered Moses the opportunity to wipe out the entire people and start again as a leader of a new people. But in the end, after their quick to flare, but also quick to release anger subsided, they returned to the relationship in the same way they intended to before Moses went up the mountain. And that is where the lesson lies for all of us, the readers. We know that we will always have moments of panic, of desperation, and of feeling a situation quickly spiraling out of control. We will always write that SFD. Without a doubt, we should work on staying sane and rational when we feel those doubts and emotions coming in. But it is the model of God and Moshe, and perhaps I'll even give him credit, my husband, who agreed not to end our relationship then and there on the phone, that we should seek to emulate. When we are presented with a situation that gets our blood boiling, that feels antithetical to anything we think is acceptable, we can react in one of two ways. We can let the other person's expectation of our reaction become the truth, or we can take a step back from the brink, take a breath, and in God's case, for real, fume for a bit, but then come back to reality and attempt a solution. When we read Ki Tisa tomorrow morning,
We might start to feel embarrassed and ashamed for what our ancestors did by building a golden calf. But I'd like to turn that on its head. This is one of our founding stories. We as a people had a weakness and allowed our SFD to win out, creating a whole lot of sores in the process. But part of the beauty of this story is that our relationship with God survived. We learned a little bit more about each other, and rather than ending things then and there, we continued to build on our partnership. I've heard it said that we like someone because, but we love someone despite. And so we are here today, quite literally, because of the conscious choice by God and Moses to love us despite. And that is a choice made from strength, one that can serve as a model for all of us. My blessing for each of us today is this. May we give each other the space to make mistakes and recognize that a relationship is built on overcoming the bumps in the road that will one day be part of our foundational stories. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to continue on page 39 for the Baruch Hu. I do think I have some helpers in the congregation who might want to come up. So I want to give a heads up. We're on page 39 with the Baruch Hu. But on page 41 is the Shema. So if I have anybody, and sorry, this side of the room, you're cut out. That's not true. If you guys want to come lead, I would happily take a leader. But I've got some folks over there who might want to lead on page 41, and you should just feel free to come on up when you're ready. We rise for the Baruch Hu on page 39. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. You may be seated. Baruch Adonai Umavir Yom Umevi Laila Umavdil Ben Yom Uve Laila Adonai Tzvaot Shemo El Chai V'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Leolam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Hamari Varavim. Page 40. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Havta Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, v'shachbenu v'kumeinu, nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu u'behem nigei yomam v'layla yomam v'layla v'avatcha tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch Atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Page 41, the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadbarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam V'shivtecha b'veitecha, u'vlechtecha b'derech, u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha, u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha, u'totafot b'neinecha, u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'isharecha. We turn to page 44. Umalchuto b'razon kiblu alehem Moshe v'nei Miriam v'nei Yisrael echanu shira v'simcha rabba v'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot osef belem malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokeyam livnei Moshe zeli anu ve'amru Adonai imloch leolam va'ed v'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai gal Yisrael. Bottom of 45. Ushmor tzeitenu uvoil chaim ol shalom yatav yad olam ufros alein sukat shlomecha baruch ata Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. We rise on page 46. Someone just tell me, do we do the tune that repeats the Vishamru part? Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Yirein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Ki sheishen emim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. U'bayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah v'yalmad divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Bagala uvizman kari v'yamaru amen. Yeshmei rabba mevorach le'olam le'almei omaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha v'richu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran v'alma v'yimeru. Amen. The private Amidah begins on the following page. shalom bimromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'yimeru amen. Kaddish Shalem on page 54. Yitgadal Yitgadash Shemei Rabbah V'yalma Divrach Hirutei V'yamlich Malchutei B'chayechon V'yomechon V'chayeducho Beit Yisrael B'agala V'zman Kariv V'yimeru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Le'almei Almaya Yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitram v'yinaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha v'richu le'lam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiram b'yalma v'yimeru amen. Titgalbal tzotona v'tchon d'chol Yisrael kadama v'hondi b'shmaya v'yimeru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom Aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Next on my list is Aleinu, and I think I might have some folks coming to join me for Aleinu. Did I make that up? I totally made that up. We rise for Aleinu on page 56. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol Latet gedula liotzer breshit shelo asanu kogoye ha'aratzot velo samanu kamishpechot ha'adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem vegor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu u'mishachavim u'modim Livnei melech malchei hamlachim Dosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim v'yosed haaretz Umoshav yikaro b'shamayim ima'al U'shchinatu zo v'gavhei meromim Hu Eloheinu einod Em Elokeinu Efen Zulato Kakatu Betorato V'yadata yom V'hashevota Elevavecha Ki Adonai Hu HaElohim B'shamayim ima'al V'al ha'aretz Mitachat Einod V'nemar v'haya Adonai L'melech al kol ha'aretz V'yom ha'hu Yeh Adonai echad U'shemo echad. You may be seated. It is hard to sing of oneness when our world is not complete, when those who once brought wholeness to our life have gone and nothing but memory can fill the emptiness their passing leaves behind. This week we honor the memories of the following people: Max Botvin, Sidney Chorney, Bella Brodsky, Bernard Goodman, Barney Kenner, Myron T. Slobin, father of Marcia Slobin, Inessa Abrams Snyder, Barry Field, the brother of Alan and Michael Field, Ira S. Gulkin, Harry Goldfein, Fanny N. Klitzner, grandmother of Lynn Field, Abraham Make, Aline Baumser Miller, Joseph Harry Miller, Israel Saltzman, Ida Bernstein, David Michael Blake, Paul Field, father of Alan and Michael Field, William Kelman, Seymour Chris, Edward Sapphire, Nettie Shore, Chana Berger, Yocheved Chasset, Sarah Heller, Marguerite Franken Gottschalk, Bella Rubin, the mother of Ruth Balsbald, Sarah Spivak, Mort Stein, Laura Buckler, Benjamin Ellman, Etta Fink, Thelma Grossman Fisher, Bella Foster, the relative of Anita Olinsky, Leo Levine, and Isidore Milgram, the grandfather of Eileen Bojar. And I apologize for names that I didn't get right. Are there any names that we were missing this week? If you're saying Kaddish, I invite you to rise and join me on page 58. Yitzgadal v'yitzgadash shemei Rabbah, B'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon u'vyomechon u'vchaye dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei tekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran b'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Well, we have some announcements. If anyone wants to grab the kids who said that they would do a Don Olam with me, I'll come meet over here.
Shabbat Shalom. I want to thank Rabbi Rachel Silverman for leading us in services tonight. She's here for the whole weekend. Tonight, for those who are staying behind, we're having a Shabbat dinner next door, so you'll have time to kibitz with her, talk to her, and get to know her a little better. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we're having a service led by Rabbi Silverman, which from 10 to 11. And because there's no school, we're bringing in the school children, our younger fry, from 11 to 11:30 right here in the sanctuary as well. So we want everybody to stay here through 11:30. And after that program, after the service ends, we'll have a kiddush luncheon next door again. And then Sunday morning, because there's no school, Rabbi Silverman will be putting on a little presentation, a little art exhibit. There's a lot art exercise or art, something to do with art. I'm not quite sure. Whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be great. Then that'll be followed by a brunch. So all these events are free. So please come get to know Rabbi Silverman, because it's a congregational decision going forward on who's going to be our next rabbi. And even though she's here, I have to then tell you, next weekend we have another candidate coming through, and that's Rabbi Bahan David. He'll be here for Friday evening, same thing, Saturday services, and Sunday. So the schedule hasn't been quite finalized, but did go out today. So immediately after that, with these two candidates, the Rabbinic Search Committee does not have any other candidates at this time. So we're going to have a congregational meeting, which is going to be Sunday, March the 6th at 9 o'clock here in the sanctuary for a congregational vote. At that time, the Rabbinic Search Committee will make its recommendation, make its report, and hopefully we can all make a proper decision, because an informed decision, because everybody will be here and have attended all these events, or at least one of these events. So I want to thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate Rabbi Silverman taking the time from her busy schedule at Temple Israel to come here, where she's the assistant rabbi, or the plain rabbi right now. And I also wanted this event, this evening, this whole weekend would not happen without all the involvement of everyone. And I want to thank the Rabbinic Search Committee, which is chaired by Susan Smaller. We have David Wasser, Steve Cohen, Ali Anton, Sherry Smith, Jeremy Weinberg, and I'm counting on my fingers because I'm sure I'm going to forget somebody. Barry, yeah, of course, how could I forget Barry? Yeah. Barry Golden standing up way in the back, holding up the fort. All the food, all the meals this weekend were cooked by our Torat Yisrael volunteers, and I really applaud them for all the work that they've done. It was a huge effort, and it was a lot of people that came together to do it. And I want to thank, of course, Elaine Shapiro, and then I'll give you this whole list of people, and it might fill up the whole room. Joanne Anton, Ali Anton, Sharon Field, Elaine Salinger, Laura Picaro, Judy Silverman, Rachel Picaro, Susan Smaller, Stephanie Noren, Adrian Schoen, who else? Judy Finkel, Linda Weissman, and our resident schlepper, Steve Shapiro. So I want to thank them all for everything, and please, when you enjoy the food, go up to one of them, tell them how great it was. And please come up, and you have a lot of opportunities to get to know Rabbi Silverman. Please make yourself known, kibitz with her, schmooze with her, and we hope you enjoy the weekend. With that, take it away.
Wait, don't go yet. Thank you. Two additions to those announcements. Sunday morning's program is for all ages. Is a little bit of learning about the story of Esther and masks, and the masks that we wear, and then I have an art project of making some masks. So I would love for anybody and everybody here to come join, and really open to all ages. I'm told we're on page 210. 11. There we go.
211.
All right, are we ready? Echad, shtayim, shalosh. Adon olam, asher malach, b'terem kol, litzir nivra, litnasa, b'chefzachol,
Azai melech shemo nikra Adon olam, Adon harei, kiglod hakol, Levado limod no rav Adon olam, Vihu haya, Vihu hove, Vihu yeye b'tifara Adon olam, Adon olam, Asher malach, Asher malach, B'terem kol yitzir nivra, V'yet nasa, V'hefzer kol, Azai melech shemo nikra Adon olam, V'hu echad, V'ein sheni, Shelo lehachbira beilun olam, V'hu rishit, V'hu chaklit, V'hu yayutzeren yora Adon olam, Adon olam, Asher malach, B'terem kol, Yitzir nivra, V'yet nasa, V'hefzer kol, Azai melech shemo nikra Adon olam, B'hu eli, V'hagoali, V'tzur havli b'yitavar Adon olam, V'nilji, Umanosli, Menakozi b'yom ekra Adon olam, Unolam, Asher malach, B'terem kol, Yitzir nivra, V'yet nasa, V'hefzer kol, Azai melech shemo nikra Adon olam, V'yado afkid ruhi, V'yet nashan v'yahara Adon olam, V'yin ruhi, Divayati, Adonai livu ara Adon olam, Adon olam, Asher malach, B'terem kol, Yitzir nivra, V'yet nasa, V'hefzer kol, Azai melech shemo nikra Adon olam.
Well done, friends. Nicely done.
Say thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.